The first thing I noticed wasn't the number. It was the color. My banking app flashed bright red across my phone screen like an emergency signal, and for a split second I thought I'd misread it. Then I blinked, and the digits burned into focus. $48,237. Charged. To my credit card. My thumb froze midair. The office around me hummed with normal Monday sounds, keyboards clacking the low hiss of the coffee machine, but my world had gone silent. I scrolled through the transaction list, each line heavier than the last. Bloom Floral Events, $700 to $800. Silvercrest Banquet Hall 19, $200. Diamond Lounge DJ, 4 hours, $100. Bridal Boutique Deposit, $2,400. It went on and on. Every charge tied to the same note in neat capital letters, Hayes Wedding. My last name, my credit card, my money. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Someone must have hacked my account. There was no other explanation. Then I saw it under the line marked Authorization E. Hayes, my brother's signature. Ethan. I pressed my lips together, the taste of metal on my tongue. The office fluorescent lights buzzed too bright, too sharp. My phone vibrated again, one new message. From Mom. Don't overreact. Ethan just borrowed it for the wedding expenses. He'll pay it back after the honeymoon. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. Around me, coworkers chatted about lunch plans, about the early spring weather in Denver, about anything that wasn't this. I stared at the message, reread it until the words blurred. Don't overreact. Just borrowed it. Like I was the unreasonable one for feeling violated. I dialed my brother's number before I could stop myself. He picked up on the second ring voice light, casual. Hey sis, what's up? My throat went dry. Did you use my credit card? There was a pause, the kind that made my stomach twist. Oh, that, he said finally. Yeah, I did. Don't worry, you'll get it back. I just needed to cover some deposits before the wedding. Deposits? Ethan, that's $48,000. You didn't even ask. He chuckled. Relax, Lauren. You make good money. It's family. I'll pay you back when things settle down. And then he laughed again. Don't be cheap, Lauren. It's my wedding. The words cracked through the phone like a slap. For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. Cheap. He'd taken $48,000 of my money without a word, and somehow I was the problem. My voice shook. You used my card without permission. That's fraud. His tone changed cooler, dismissive. You always blow things out of proportion. Mom said you'd understand. My own mother knew. I hung up before the tears could rise. The office clock ticked too loud. Somewhere a coworker laughed. I stared at the wall, my heart thudding so hard it hurt. Within seconds, another message buzzed onto my screen. From Mom again. Don't call the bank. It'll just make things messy. Ethan's under a lot of pressure. Be a good sister. Good sister. That phrase had followed me my entire life like a leash. Be a good sister. Be patient. Be kind. Be understanding. The phone slipped from my hand and landed softly on the desk. The glow of the screen faded, leaving my reflection staring back 32 years old, exhausted, and suddenly aware of just how easily my family could take what I'd built. I'd spent a decade earning stability, paying off loans, building credit planning for a future that now felt like a joke. $48,000, gone with a single swipe. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was entitlement. The same entitlement that had followed Ethan since childhood, dressed up as charm, excused as stress. The world outside my window blurred into motion, cars, sunlight, people crossing the street, and I sat frozen in the center of it all. Breath shallow, spine straightening with something unfamiliar. Not fear, not guilt. Determination. This time I wasn't going to be the quiet one. This time I would not let family mean permission. By the time I drove home that evening, the sun had already dropped behind the Rockies, painting the Denver skyline in bruised shades of purple and gold. The world looked peaceful from the outside. Inside my car, my pulse hadn't slowed since the bank alert that morning. I parked in my usual spot outside the brick apartment complex, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It was strange how easily something ordinary, checking your balance walking into your home, could turn foreign when trust broke. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender detergent and roasted coffee, the scent that used to calm me. Tonight, it only reminded me of control, of order, of everything that suddenly felt stolen. I set my purse down, kicked off my heels, and sat at the edge of the couch, scrolling through my phone. Notifications had multiplied like weeds. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 from an unknown number, Tessa, my brother's fiancée. The voicemail played automatically, her voice bright and sweet, with a hint of warning. "Hey, Lauren, just wanted to say thanks for helping out with the wedding. You're honestly a lifesaver. We'll pay you back after things settle down. Promise." The fake cheer in her tone made my stomach twist. Promise. That word had lost its meaning in my family years ago. I tossed the phone onto the table and buried my face in my hands. All day, I'd replayed the same thought. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. But then I remembered Mom's text, "Don't call the bank." That wasn't confusion. That was cover-up. My reflection caught in the dark TV screen eyes, swollen mouth, tight. I'd spent years building my independence, carefully crafting the life my parents said a good daughter didn't need. They'd always said I was too serious, too responsible, too focused on work. They said it with pride when it benefited them, and resentment when it didn't. I looked around my small but warm apartment, each piece of furniture bought with my own money, every corner a quiet rebellion against the chaos I grew up in. And now, even this piece felt contaminated. The phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Mom Ethan said, "You hung up on him." "That's not fair. He's under pressure. You've always been so emotional." Emotional. The word stung. They said it whenever I caught them doing something wrong, when I pointed out the unpaid loans, the forgotten birthdays, the way Ethan never faced consequences. It was their way of shrinking me back down. I typed and erased 3 different replies before finally setting the phone face down. My father called next, voice heavy but soft, the way he always spoke when Mom had already decided everything. "Lauren, sweetheart, you know your brother didn't mean harm. He just wanted a nice wedding. It's been a hard few years for him." I swallowed. "And me. It's been easy for me." He hesitated. "You're the strong one. You'll recover. You always do." I hung up without another word. That sentence had followed me like a curse. "You'll recover." As if that excused everything. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights blinking below. I'd built my life on the belief that if I worked hard, people would treat me fairly, that if I loved my family enough, they'd love me back with respect. Tonight, that belief cracked. Somewhere between the charges, the messages, and the laughter in Ethan's voice, I understood they didn't see me as family, they saw me as backup. I picked up my phone, opened the banking app again, and scrolled to the last charge, $19, $200 to Silvercrest Banquet Hall. Authorized by E. Hayes. That's when the thought hit quiet, but sharp. If they could use my credit card for a wedding, what else had they used? Rent, utilities. Maybe they'd always been using me. The air in the apartment felt thinner. I sank back into the couch and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I woke the next morning to the harsh light of my phone screen vibrating against the nightstand. The clock read 6:47 a.m., and there it was again. My mother's name flashing across the display like an alarm I didn't ask for. I answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Lauren, honestly," she began without a greeting, her tone clipped and sharp. "You embarrassed your brother last night. He said you hung up on him. Is that true?" I pressed the heel of my palm against my forehead, sitting up. "Mom, he stole from me." "Don't exaggerate," she said immediately. "It's a family card." "No, Mom, it's my card. My name, my income, my credit limit. You know that." There was a pause long enough for me to hear her sigh, the kind that usually came right before she switched from defense to guilt. "Sweetheart, Ethan's under so much pressure. You've always been the responsible one. You have savings, a steady job. He's starting a family." I stared out the window. The snow from last night had melted into a thin film of slush that sparkled under the early sun. "He's starting a family by committing fraud," I said quietly. "You're overreacting." Her voice softened in a way that almost worked on me. "It's just money." You can replace money. That's not the point. I snapped my voice sharper than I intended. It's about respect. There was silence on the other end. Then she said with a tone I recognized too well, "You know your father and I are really disappointed in how you're handling this. Ethan said you called him a thief. Do you realize how that makes you look? How it makes me look?" I repeated, incredulous. "He took $48,000, and I'm the problem, Lauren," she warned, her voice hardening. "Don't make this worse. He said he'll pay you back." "When after the honeymoon? After the divorce?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Lauren," she gasped. "That's cruel. So is stealing," I said, and hung up. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the heater. I sat still staring at the phone in my lap until it stopped shaking in my hands. The anger came in waves, sharp, then hollow, then sharp again. My mother's words echoed in my mind like a lifetime on repeat. "Don't make this worse. Be patient. Be the good one." That had been my role since childhood, the steady one, the peacemaker, the problem solver. I'd worn it like armor. Now it felt like a trap. I stood and walked into the kitchen pouring coffee I didn't even want. My reflection in the stainless steel kettle looked tired older somehow. I thought about the wedding white flowers, champagne toasts, laughter under fairy lights, all paid for with my credit. The image twisted into something grotesque. How long had they been planning this? How many times had they decided for me, spent for me, spoken for me? Because they assumed I'd just accept it. A vibration pulled me from my thoughts. Another text, from Ethan this time. "Sis, this drama is ridiculous. I told Mom I'd handle it. You're making me look bad in front of Tessa's family. Just chill. You'll get your money back." Then another seconds later. "You always make things about you. You should be happy for me instead of jealous." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Jealous of what? His audacity, his ability to take without consequence. My response was simple. I reported the charges. "The bank will contact you." I hit send before I could hesitate. A minute later, my phone rang again, his name lighting up the screen, but I didn't answer. I let it ring out each buzz, a small act of defiance. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The city was waking up, people heading to work, traffic building, a world still turning despite the chaos in my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like their daughter or his sister. I felt like someone standing on the edge of a decision. I took a deep breath, steady and deliberate, and said it out loud to the empty room. "Enough." The word enough lingered in the air long after I said it, soft but solid, like the click of a lock turning into place. I hadn't planned what came next, but my body moved before my doubt could stop it. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen cutting through the dim morning light, and typed into the search bar, "Unauthorized family credit card charges, legal options." Colorado. Thousands of results appeared. My eyes scanned terms I'd never thought I'd need to understand: fraudulent use, financial abuse, civil recovery. For the first time, the word family and the word abuse appeared in the same sentence. I froze. That's what this was? Wasn't it? Not just a misunderstanding, not a one-time mistake. It was years of quiet exploitation dressed up as family loyalty. I reached for my coffee cup, but my hand was trembling too much to hold it steady. I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, efficient, all business. "Can you confirm the charges, ma'am?" she asked. I read each one out loud, voice steadier with every line. "Those were not authorized," I said. She paused, then her tone changed, colder, formal. "We'll freeze your account temporarily. You'll receive a claim number by email. If the other party disputes it, we may need supporting documentation." I knew exactly what that meant. Evidence. Proof. I could already hear Ethan saying I was overreacting, Mom calling me dramatic, Dad quietly telling me to just let it go. I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. I opened a new folder on my desktop, Ethan, charges. Screenshot after screenshot, I documented everything: emails from vendors, receipts, text messages, even the voicemail from his fiancée thanking me for helping out. The act of collecting each piece felt like reclaiming small fragments of control. By the time I was done, the folder held more than proof, it held years of buried resentment. Around noon, Nora knocked on my office door. She'd been my closest friend at work for 5 years, the kind of person who noticed when I'd been quiet too long. "You look like you've been through a war," she said, setting a sandwich on my desk. I told her everything starting from the alert that morning. I expected judgment, or maybe disbelief. Instead, she just nodded slowly, the way someone does when they've seen it before. "Lauren," she said carefully, "this isn't family drama. It's financial abuse." The words hit harder than I expected. "Abuse," I repeated. "It's my brother, not abuse doesn't need to come from strangers," she interrupted gently. "It's about power. He took something from you because he thought he could, and your parents are helping him justify it." I stared at her, feeling my throat tighten. I hadn't cried since yesterday, but now the tears came quietly without permission. "I don't even want revenge," I said finally. "I just want to be respected." "Then you have to stop waiting for them to give you that," she said. "You take it." That night I went home and sat by the window with my laptop again. I drafted an email to my family. Subject line, "Unauthorized use of my credit card. Notice." The message was short, formal, and unlike anything they'd ever seen from me. "All transactions made under my credit account have been frozen pending investigation. Please do not attempt to contact vendors or my bank. Any communication regarding this matter should be done in writing." I read it twice, then hit send. The whoosh of the email leaving my outbox sounded final, like a door quietly closing. 10 minutes later, the phone lit up with incoming calls. Mom, then Ethan, then Mom again. I silenced it and left the phone face down. Outside, snow began to fall again, the flakes illuminated by the streetlight like slow-moving embers. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and felt the smallest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, peace mixed with defiance. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and the anger, a calm certainty took root. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my name, my voice, and the right to finally be heard. The apartment was too quiet that night, the kind of quiet that made every small sound echo louder. The refrigerator's hum, the ticking of the wall clock, the whisper of snow against the window. I sat on the couch with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the muted light of my phone screen. 21 missed calls. 9 messages from Mom, 3 from Dad, 6 from Ethan. I didn't open any of them. The words would all sound the same anyway. Guilt, excuses, manipulation wrapped in affection. I'd spent my whole life learning to translate that tone. I scrolled instead through the credit card statements again, the cold precision of numbers grounding me. $7, $800. £19, $200. $48, $237 in total, the sum of my silence. I'd always thought being the good daughter meant patience, that being understanding, forgiving, and quiet made me stronger. Tonight, it just made me feel invisible. My stomach twisted as I thought about the last family gathering. Christmas 3 months ago. Ethan had arrived an hour late, arms full of expensive gifts, laughing loudly about business being good this year. My mother's eyes had glowed with pride. "He's so ambitious," she'd said while handing me a dish towel. "Not everyone can be like him." I'd stood at the sink washing plates, pretending not to notice the unspoken comparison. That night, when I offered to cover the cost of dinner, Mom had smiled approvingly. "See, that's what I mean. You're so dependable." Dependable, not loved, not appreciated, just useful. I curled tighter into the couch. That word had been my entire role in the family, a silent safety net for everyone else's mistakes. I remembered when Ethan wrecked Dad's old truck in college. I was 17, working weekends at the local cafe, saving for my own car. Mom came into my room that night, eyes red, voice trembling. "Don't tell your father I asked, but could you lend Ethan your savings? He needs to pay for repairs before Dad finds out." I'd said yes before she even finished. It felt noble at the time. Now it just felt pathetic. The pattern had repeated over and over. Ethan made the mess and I cleaned it up. Mom called it family loyalty. Dad called it peacekeeping. I called it exhaustion. The clock ticked to 11:03. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance, fading into the night. I rose and went to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water I didn't drink. My reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger eye's hollow shoulders tense. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt proud of myself without someone else's approval attached to it. The memory wouldn't come. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "We raised you better than this. You're turning your back on family." I laughed, a small, bitter sound that startled me. Raised me better. They'd raised me to believe that love was measured in sacrifice, that my worth was how much I could give without complaint. And I'd believed them. I turned off the phone and set it face down, the darkness swallowing the glow. My gaze drifted to the framed photo on the bookshelf, me and Ethan at our parents' lake cabin, maybe 15 and 17. He was grinning, arms slung over my shoulder, sunburned and carefree. I looked at my own face in that picture, trying so hard to match his smile. The tears came slow this time, quiet but certain. Not because of the money, not even because of the betrayal, but because of the years I'd spent hoping that being good would someday be enough to make them see me. I wiped my eyes and let the silence settle again. Somewhere outside, a plow passed by, clearing the street. The rhythmic scrape of metal on asphalt filled the emptiness, strangely soothing. I stood there for a long time, watching the snow swirl in the streetlight glow. My breath fogged the window, and for the first time that day, I felt something shift. Not anger, not despair. Just resolve. A quiet understanding that if I wanted peace, I'd have to stop waiting for them to give it to me. I'd have to take it myself. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the floor. My head throbbed from lack of sleep, but my mind was alert in a way it hadn't been in years. I sat at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt toast in the air, a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling beside my laptop. The cursor blinked at me like it was waiting for courage. I opened a new document and titled it Family Ledger. It wasn't a budget or a list of expenses. It was history, the kind that hides behind smiles and birthday photos. Line by line, I began to type. Age 17, worked weekends at Hillcrest Cafe. Sent $80 a week to Ethan for gas money so he could commute to college out of state. Mom said he needs every advantage. You'll understand someday. Age 22, first job after graduation. Ethan borrowed my credit card to buy a laptop for his startup. Promised to repay. Never did. Mom said he's building something big. Be patient. Age 26. Ethan lost his job. I covered 3 months of his rent because Mom said he was too proud to ask Dad. Age 28. I earned my first promotion. Dad clapped Ethan on the back at dinner and said, "Maybe your sister will help you get back on your feet." Age 31. Bought my first condo. Mom frowned and said, "A house." That's a big step for a single woman. By the time I reached the present, my fingers were shaking. Reading it all together made it impossible to deny the pattern. I wasn't the supportive sister, they were the dependents. I'd been cast as a background character in their story, valued only for what I could provide. I sat back in the chair, letting out a long breath. Somewhere under the exhaustion, anger began to take shape. Not the wild kind that burns fast, but the slow, steady kind that makes you act with precision. I realized I'd spent half my life giving them everything they asked for, and now, when I finally said no, they called it betrayal. The sound of my phone broke the silence. Another voicemail. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Mom. I played it anyway, maybe out of morbid curiosity. Her voice trembled with rehearsed sadness. "Lauren, your father and I talked. Ethan feels terrible, but you're blowing this out of proportion. Money isn't worth ruining the family over." Then softer. "You've always been so sensitive. We just want peace." I stared at the phone heat crawling up my neck. Peace. Their peace always meant my silence. I deleted the voicemail and opened my email instead. My bank had replied, "Please provide supporting documents confirming the charges were unauthorized." I attached screenshots, receipts, Ethan's text messages, and hit send. The moment I did, something in me unclenched. This was the first action I'd taken purely for myself. No permission, no apology, just the truth. That evening, I went for a walk through my neighborhood, bundled in a coat scarf tied around my throat. The streets were slick with melted snow, the air sharp with the smell of pine and exhaust. I passed a family decorating their porch with string lights, the father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders to hang the last bulb. They laughed when the lights flickered on. It should have made me sad. Instead, it reminded me that love could look like joy, not control. By the time I returned home, the air inside felt different, lighter. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and stared again at the family ledger. I added one more line at the bottom, age 32. Ethan charged $48,000 to my credit card. Mom called me selfish for reporting it. I called it the day I stopped apologizing. I saved the document and sat back. The heater rattled to life, filling the room with its low hum. I closed my eyes and whispered, "No more." Tomorrow, I decided I would stop reacting and start rebuilding. I would learn the laws, collect every document, prepare every fact. If they wanted to treat me like a resource, I'd show them what happens when the resource runs out. The next day, I woke with a clarity that almost frightened me, the kind of calm that comes not from rest, but from decision. I showered, dressed for work, and tied my hair back the same way I always did, but something inside me had shifted. The old version of me, the one who tried to make everyone happy, had gone quiet. I checked my phone before leaving. No new messages from Ethan, just a single unread email from the bank confirming receipt of my dispute and assigning a case number. It felt strangely official, like a seal of separation between me and the people I used to bend for. At the office, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Nora looked up from her desk the moment I walked in. "You look different," she said. "Did you sleep?" Barely, I admitted, hanging my coat, but I finally did something right. Her lips curved into a small smile. "Good, now keep going." We spent our lunch break together, her helping me draft a detailed statement for the bank. She showed me how to catalog the timeline of events, each charge, each message, each call. "If it comes to a legal case," she said, "you'll already have the groundwork." I nodded, fingers tapping steadily against the keyboard. I just never thought I'd need to defend myself against my own family. Nora's expression softened. "People think love excuses everything. It doesn't. Boundaries are love too." That sentence stayed with me long after we returned to our desks. Boundaries are love too. It was such a foreign concept. In my family, love meant endurance, the ability to absorb hurt quietly and call it loyalty. When I got home that night, my phone was waiting with another storm of messages, this time from Dad. "Your mother is upset. Ethan's ashamed. You need to call him before this goes too far." I typed back a single line. It already went too far the moment he stole from me. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began pulling everything together into a single digital folder labeled Case Hayes. Receipts, bank emails, screenshots, the voicemail from Tessa thanking me, the old message from Mom saying, "Don't call the bank." Evidence, all of it. I saved copies to a flash drive and locked it in my desk drawer. I poured myself a glass of water, staring at the faint reflection in the kitchen window. The city outside glittered with life. People coming home from work, headlights streaking by. For the first time, I didn't feel small inside it. I felt grounded, capable. My laptop pinged a new email. From an address I didn't recognize at first. Venmo notification. "Ethan Hayes sent you $500, no message attached, just that." I laughed quietly. $500, a peace offering disguised as restitution. I transferred it into savings and wrote a short reply. Noted, balance remaining $47,737. Then I shut the computer. That night, I slept for the first time in days, deeply and without dreams. When I woke, snow had returned, blanketing the street in a hush that made everything feel possible again. I brewed coffee, pulled on my sweater, and stood by the window, watching sunlight catch on the frost. My phone buzzed once more, another message from Mom, long, frantic paragraphs about family reputation and forgiveness. I didn't open it. Instead, I scrolled back through the messages from Nora. Document everything she'd said. The moment you stop explaining yourself, they'll have to face what they did. I smiled faintly. She was right. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was building distance, proof of who I was becoming. As I left for work, I glanced one last time around my small apartment. It wasn't much, a couch, a desk, a bookshelf, but it was mine, paid for, protected, and finally respected, at least by me. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something my family would never understand: the quiet power of not needing their approval. That evening, Denver's sky turned the color of steel as snow threatened again, the air sharp enough to sting when I stepped out of the bank. I had just finished signing an affidavit confirming the disputed transactions and giving my consent to freeze the account. The banker, a middle-aged woman named Ruth, had listened to my story with a kind of weary understanding that made it clear she'd heard it before. "You'd be surprised how often it's family," she said softly as I handed over the paperwork. I nodded, but the words still unsettled me. I wasn't surprised anymore. The drive home was slow tires crunching over thin ice. When I reached my apartment, the answering machine light was blinking red, a relic of the past I'd never bothered to unplug. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, louder than life. "Lauren, I can't believe you actually froze the card. Do you have any idea what you've done? The vendors are calling non-stop. The banquet hall says we lost our date. Mom's furious. You ruined everything. You always do." His voice cracked near the end, less angry than panicked. Then the line went dead. I deleted the message without listening again. There was something liberating in that tiny motion. I didn't owe him my outrage. 10 minutes later, a text from Mom arrived. "We need to talk in person. Family meeting, tomorrow night. Don't make this harder than it already is." I stared at the screen. The old me would have said yes immediately, driven across town, and apologized before I even sat down. Instead, I typed back, "I'll come," but only to talk, not to fix what I didn't break. The next evening, the Hayes living room looked exactly as it always had. Warm lighting, floral couch cushions, the faint smell of pot roast clinging to the air. Yet it felt different. Smaller. Tighter. My parents sat side by side on the sofa, Ethan pacing in front of the fireplace like a caged animal. Tessa wasn't there. Apparently, she'd decided to stay at her parents' house until things settled. Mom spoke first. "Lauren, you've put us all in a terrible position. The wedding is next weekend and now everything's falling apart." I stayed standing, hands clasped loosely in front of me. "That's not my doing." "Technically, Ethan interrupted it is. If you hadn't frozen the card, none of this would be happening." I turned toward him. "If you hadn't stolen from me, there would have been nothing to freeze." "Stolen," he scoffed. "It's called helping family. You think you're better than us because you've got a job and an apartment. Grow up, Lauren." Mom's hand shot out to grab his arm. "Ethan, stop." She looked at me, eyes glossy. "He made a mistake, sweetheart. Don't turn this into something ugly." "It already is ugly," I said, my voice even. "You all knew about it. You let it happen." Dad exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "We just didn't think it'd be such a big deal. You always overreact." I felt something harden inside me. $48,000 isn't an overreaction, Dad. It's my savings, my credit, my future. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "This is a copy of every charge, every email, every message. The bank has it too. If this doesn't get resolved in 30 days, they'll pursue legal action." The room went silent. Even Ethan stopped pacing. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across his face. Mom's voice came out small. "You wouldn't really." "I already did," I said. The sound of the grandfather clock ticking filled the space between us. 10 seconds. 20. Finally, Dad spoke, voice low. "Maybe we can work out a payment plan." I nodded once. "You can. The bank will contact you directly." Ethan swore under his breath and stormed toward the hallway, slamming the door behind him. The picture frames on the wall rattled. Mom's shoulders slumped. "I don't recognize you anymore." "That's the point," I said quietly. "You raised me to be obedient, not respected. I'm changing that." When I walked out into the cold, the snow had started again, slow, deliberate flakes, drifting down like punctuation marks to an ending I should have written years ago. The wind bit at my cheeks, but for the first time in months, I felt warm. The next morning, the sky was a flat gray sheet over Denver, heavy with the promise of another storm. My hands trembled slightly as I held the travel mug of coffee, but not from nerves, from adrenaline that hadn't yet burned out. The night before had been the first time I'd stood up to my family without apologizing afterward. It left a strange silence in its wake, not emptiness exactly, but space. At work, Nora noticed the difference immediately. "You look like someone who just won a war," she said, sliding a file across my desk. "Not yet," I replied, "but I think I've stopped losing." She smiled faintly. "Good, let's make sure it stays that way." During lunch, she helped me refine my timeline into a full legal report, something airtight if the bank required escalation. We added every text, every voicemail, every timestamp. The meticulous process suited me. It was math and truth. Two things my family could never twist. By afternoon, I received an email from the bank investigator confirming the freeze was officially in effect. The funds couldn't be touched until the matter was resolved. Attached to the message was a copy of my statement under the subject line, Claim, Fraudulent Use by Authorized Family Member. I read it twice. The phrase felt surreal, like reading about someone else. But this was my life now carved into legal language. On the drive home, the snow had begun to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, muting the city under its weight. When I walked into my apartment, the lights of my answering machine blinked again, 3 new messages. I didn't have to guess who. The first was Mom. Lauren, please, call me. Your brother's devastated. He's been up all night. You're tearing this family apart. The second was Dad, his tone quieter. Maybe we can all meet again. No lawyers, no banks. Just talk. The third was Ethan. His voice was rough, angry, desperate. I can't believe you do this to me. You froze everything. Tessa's threatening to call off the wedding. You're ruining my life. Are you happy now? I pressed delete on all 3, one after another, without listening to the ends. The silence that followed was the cleanest sound I'd ever heard. I made dinner slowly, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, letting the rhythm of ordinary things ground me. Halfway through, I thought about how many years I'd spent cooking for them during holidays, standing over a stove while everyone else laughed in the living room. They'd call it tradition. I'd call it servitude. The knock on the door startled me. It was soft, uncertain. Through the peephole, I saw Nora's familiar red scarf. I let her in and she held up 2 takeout bags. Figured you'd forget to eat, she said. We sat on the couch eating Chinese food straight from the cartons while the snow thickened outside. She listened as I recounted the confrontation at my parents' house. When I finished, she leaned back, crossing her legs. So what now? I wait, I said. Let the process play out. And after that, I hesitated. After that, maybe I build a life that doesn't revolve around damage control. Nora smiled. Sounds like a plan. After she left, I lingered by the window for a long time, watching the flakes whirl beneath the streetlight. I remembered being 12, staring out a window just like this after Ethan got caught cheating on a math test. Mom had scolded me instead because I'd told the teacher. You don't turn on family, she'd said. I'd carried that guilt for 20 years, believing loyalty meant silence, but silence was what had built this. My phone buzzed on the counter, a new text from an unknown number. This is Ruth from the bank. Just confirming your case file is strong. You did everything right. Everything right? I read the words again and felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but relief. Outside, a plow rumbled down the street, scraping the snow aside. The sound was rough, cleansing, certain. I whispered it to myself like a promise. Everything right. Then I turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and slept without dreams. By Friday, the calls had slowed to a trickle like a storm losing strength. I woke to a pale sun pushing through the blinds and a new rhythm to my morning's coffee, a quiet breakfast, no phone buzzing with demands. But peace was never free in my family. It was usually just the calm before the next manipulation. At 10 a.m., while reviewing a client's audit file, my desk phone rang. It was the receptionist downstairs. There's a woman here asking for you, she said. Says it's urgent. I felt my stomach tighten. Describe her. Mid-50s Pearl's blue suit looks determined. I closed my eyes. Send her up. 30 seconds later, my mother appeared at the door of my cubicle, carrying the same leather purse she brought to church on Sundays. The smell of her perfume, a mix of roses and starch, filled the air instantly. Around us, my coworkers pretended not to stare. Lauren, she began, her voice already trembling with outrage. I can't believe you're doing this! At your workplace of all places! I stood before she could corner me. We can talk outside. In the hallway, she turned on me, eyes flashing. Do you have any idea what you've done to your brother? He's humiliated. The wedding is off. The banquet hall refuses to refund the deposit. You've destroyed months of planning. Mom, I said quietly, he used my credit card without permission. He was desperate. He wanted to give Tessa the day she deserved. At my expense, her lips pressed thin. You've always been selfish. All that money sitting in your account, and you couldn't help your own brother. What's wrong with you? I felt something shift inside me, the last fragile thread of guilt snapping clean. What's wrong, I said slowly, is that you taught me love means erasing myself. You called it loyalty. It was control. Her expression faltered for just a moment before hardening again. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother." "And I'm your daughter," I replied evenly. "You just forgot that means I'm a person too." The silence that followed felt enormous. For the first time, she didn't have a script ready. The authority in her voice wavered, replaced by something uncertain. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. "You can still fix this," she said. "Call the bank, tell them it was a misunderstanding. They'll reopen the account and this can all go away." I shook my head. "It's already in review. The decision's out of my hands." "You're making a fool of us." "No, Mom," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'm showing you I'm not one." Her mouth opened as if to argue, but nothing came. She turned and walked down the hall, her heels clicking like tiny hammers on tile. My coworkers pretended to type faster. When the elevator doors closed behind her, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My legs felt shaky, but my voice had stayed steady. That alone felt like victory. Later that afternoon, Ruth from the bank called. "Ms. Hayes, we've completed our initial investigation. All disputed charges have been confirmed as unauthorized. The funds are being reversed to your account, pending final verification." For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak, so it settled. "Nearly. We'll notify the involved parties next week." "Thank you," I whispered. After work, I drove to the edge of the city where the skyline opened into wide plains dusted with snow. The horizon was tinted pink, fading to blue. I parked on the shoulder, rolled down the window, and let the cold air sting my face. I'd always believed confrontation meant destruction, that standing up for myself would burn every bridge. But here, in the hush of winter dusk, I realized something else. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to light your own way. As I turned the key in the ignition, my phone vibrated with a single new message. "Ethan, we need to talk. Please." I stared at it for a long time before typing one word back: tomorrow. By Sunday morning, the story had already slipped out of the family's control. I hadn't posted a thing, not a word, not a photo, but somehow it spread anyway, the way secrets always do when they're soaked in entitlement. It started with a relative's Facebook post, one of those vague, performative things. Some people choose money over family. Sad times before what should have been a beautiful wedding. Within hours, the comments filled with speculation. Cousins, aunts, and old family friends chimed in, most assuming Ethan was the victim. Poor boy, so much pressure. His sister's always been difficult. I would have ignored it, should have ignored it if the screenshots hadn't started circulating. Someone, likely a vendor, leaked the cancellation notice from the banquet hall. The email was clear. Charges declined due to fraudulent use of third-party card. Booking voided. My name sat there bold next to the bank's letterhead. The illusion shattered. Suddenly, everyone saw what had really happened. By noon, Ethan's carefully crafted image began to crumble. The vendors started posting warnings in local business groups: be cautious when accepting payments from clients using cards that aren't their own. His friends, once loud defenders, went quiet. Even Tessa's cousin posted on Instagram, "Imagine calling your sister cheap after spending her money." When the first text from Ethan came through, it was pure rage. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you? You had to humiliate me." Then another. "You ruined my life." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "I didn't ruin anything. You just didn't think you'd ever face consequences." He didn't answer. That evening, I sat in my apartment scrolling through my phone while the city glowed outside. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, not exactly. It was something heavier, a kind of quiet justice that didn't feel like victory, but like truth finally surfacing. Around 8, Mom called again. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me later. Her voice trembled, half angry, half desperate. "Lauren, what have you done? Everyone's talking. Your brother's heartbroken. The wedding's postponed, maybe canceled. The vendors are threatening to sue. Do you realize how this makes us look?" I replayed the message twice, just to absorb the words that mattered most: how this makes us look. Not what Ethan did, not what I endured, just the family's reputation. I deleted the voicemail and turned off my phone. Monday morning, I found out Tessa had left him. It came through Nora, who'd seen it online before I did. She posted something about starting over, Nora said, carefully watching my reaction. "I think she found out more than he told her." I took a long sip of coffee before answering. Good for her. By noon, Ethan showed up outside my building. I saw him through the glass doors, pacing like a man trying to swallow his own pride. His hair was unkempt dark circles under his eyes. He spotted me and waved, but I didn't move. My hand rested on the glass, calm and steady. For once, he looked smaller than me. He mouthed the words, "Please," but I turned and walked away. That night, my inbox filled with messages from extended relatives, some angry, some apologetic, some suddenly sympathetic. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. The refund from the investigation was pending $48, $237. Reversal complete. Seeing the number again, but this time in my favor, filled me with a satisfaction I couldn't quite describe. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that standing my ground didn't make me cruel. That truth had a way of balancing itself when you stopped protecting the people who broke it. Before going to bed, I looked at the framed photo on my desk, me and Ethan as kids, barefoot on the beach, holding hands against a horizon that seemed endless. I studied our faces, wondering when love had turned into obligation. Then I slid the photo into a drawer. I whispered to the quiet room, "Some things deserve to stay buried." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for meaning it. Tuesday came with a cold drizzle that blurred the world outside my office windows. I was reviewing loan files when my manager Ruth approached with a quiet knock on my cubicle wall. "There's someone here to see you," she said softly. "He says it's family." My heart dropped. Ethan stood in the lobby, his suit wrinkled, the tie half undone, like he'd lost the will to pretend. For a moment, I just looked at him through the glass partition, my brother, the golden boy, the one everyone said was destined for better things, while I was told to be grateful. His reflection shimmered against the rain-slicked windows, smaller now, fragile. I stepped out. "You shouldn't be here," he exhaled, rubbing his temple. "I didn't know where else to go. Mom won't talk to me." Tessa moved out. "My job's suspended until the investigation clears." He swallowed. "I messed up, okay? But you didn't have to destroy me." "I didn't destroy you," I said evenly. "I just stopped protecting you." His jaw clenched. "You think this is justice? It's accountability." He looked at me, really looked this time like he was trying to find the sister who once paid his phone bill and stayed up helping him fill out college forms he never submitted. "You used to care about family." "I still do," I said, voice steady. "That's why I'm not letting you keep hurting it." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then reached into his coat pocket. "Mom told me to give you this." He held out a small silver key. "The one for the old lake cabin. She said you'd probably want it now." I took it, the metal cool against my palm. I didn't ask for it. "I know. She said it's her way of admitting she was wrong." "Don't get excited, it nearly killed her to say that." A tired laugh escaped me despite everything. "And you?" He met my eyes, shame flickering there. "I thought you'd always bail me out. You were the responsible one, it's what you did. When the card got declined, I panicked. Mom said you wouldn't mind. She said you owed it to me after everything Dad spent on you for college." "That's not an excuse," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know, I just didn't think you'd fight back." There it was, the truth, buried under years of family conditioning. He'd never feared crossing me because I'd never shown teeth. Until now. I stepped closer. "Ethan, I don't hate you, but I can't save you anymore. If you want your life back, start by earning it." He nodded once, eyes glistening. "Tessa said something like that too." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. Apologies meant little without change. Still, as I watched him walk away into the rain, I realized something had shifted, not in him, but in me. I no longer felt the old pull to chase after him to fix everything. The silence between us was clean, not cruel. That evening, I visited my parents' house for the first time since it all began. The house smelled like lemon polish and nostalgia. Mom answered the door, her eyes puffy but her voice softer than I remembered. "Lauren." "Mom." She stepped aside without a word. Dad sat in his armchair staring at the muted news on TV. When he saw me, he cleared his throat. "Your mother and I talked. We realized we treated you unfairly." Mom flinched at his bluntness. "What your father means is we didn't see how much we leaned on you until it broke something." I sat opposite them. "It didn't just break something," I said quietly. "It broke me. For years." Mom's voice trembled. "I know. I just thought helping Ethan was what family did." "Helping is asking," I said. "Taking is not." Silence stretched. Dad finally nodded the smallest gesture of respect he'd ever given me. "You're right." When I left that night, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and forgiveness, not full, not clean, but beginning. In my car, I looked again at the silver key Ethan had given me. I turned it over once before slipping it onto my keychain. Not as a gift, but as a reminder. Some doors you lock to keep others out. Some you keep to remember never to hand over your keys again. 2 weeks later, the world finally settled into a quieter rhythm. The noise had burned itself out, the gossip threads died down, the social media posts vanished under new scandals, and my family had gone from outrage to uneasy silence. I spent my evenings reading by the window, learning what peace felt like when it wasn't just the pause between crises. Then one evening, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, cream paper handwritten address. I recognized the looping cursive before I opened it. Tessa. Inside was a short letter. "Lauren, I owe you an apology. I should have asked questions sooner. I wanted to believe Ethan's version because it was easier than admitting who he'd become. I left him the day I learned the truth. You did the right thing even when everyone else made you feel wrong. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." At the bottom, a small note. "P.S. I heard you're managing the new branch downtown. Congratulations. You deserve everything coming your way." I stared at the page until my vision blurred. Tessa had always been polite to me, surface-level kindness, never intimacy. But this felt different, real, healing in its quiet way. The next morning, I arrived at work early. The new branch smelled of fresh paint and coffee grounds, the hum of computers still finding their rhythm. My promotion had come through faster than expected, a reward for catching an internal accounting error that could have cost the bank millions. My boss said, "You've got the kind of integrity we need in leadership." For once, those words didn't feel like pressure, they felt like truth. Around lunchtime, Ruth knocked on my door smiling. "There's someone asking for you at reception." My stomach tensed automatically, but her tone was calm. "Relax. It's not family this time." A woman named Marjorie Hayes. It took a moment to process. My grandmother. When I reached the lobby, she was sitting in a chair near the window cane, resting across her lap, white hair perfectly pinned. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she told me during college that I should learn to let your brother shine. "Grandma," I said carefully. She looked up, her eyes sharper than I expected. "You look like your mother used to before life softened her spine." I almost laughed. "That's one way to say hello." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit. I won't take much of your time. I just came to say I'm proud of you." I blinked. Proud. I read the bank's local bulletin, saw your name. Then I heard about the family fiasco. Her mouth tightened. "I don't condone what Ethan did, but I understand why he thought he could. We raised him to believe he could." The weight of her words pressed on the air between us. "I tried to teach your mother that strength isn't selfishness," she continued. "She learned the opposite. She believed being needed was love. You broke that pattern." For a second, I couldn't speak. Then, softly, "I didn't mean to break anything." "Sometimes breaking is building," she said, leaning on her cane to stand. "You just keep your boundaries. The women in this family forget that line too easily." She squeezed my hand once before leaving. Her touch was cool, but the warmth it left behind stayed long after she disappeared into the afternoon light. That night, I walked to the lake cabin Ethan had given the key for. It sat at the edge of still water, the reflection of cypress trees trembling in the wind. The place hadn't changed much, same creaky porch, same smell of pine and salt. But I had. Inside, dust floated through the air like old memories finally exhaling. I opened the curtains, letting light spill over the furniture. On the mantel, a faded photo of our family. Mom, Dad. Ethan and me smiled from decades ago. I didn't take it down. I just set the key beside it and whispered, "This is where it ends." The boundaries weren't walls anymore. They were architecture foundations for the kind of peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's permission. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't brace myself for what might come next. I simply let the quiet be mine. 6 months later, the Florida air had already turned heavy with summer heat, the kind that smells like salt and citrus. I sat on the porch of the cabin that night, the same one that used to belong to my parents, sipping iced tea and listening to the cicadas. The lake shimmered under the moonlight calm and certain like it had been waiting for me to stop fighting the current. Inside, Everything bore my touch. Now, soft linen curtains instead of the old polyester ones Mom insisted were practical, a bookshelf filled with novels I'd promised myself I'd read a new coat of pale sea glass paint that made the small space glow. The home wasn't grand, but it was mine, entirely defiantly mine. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A message preview from Mom dinner on Sunday. Your dad wants to see you. I let the screen dim before answering. For years, that kind of message would have sent me spiraling nerves, rehearsed apologies. Guilt, but now I typed slowly, deliberately. I'll check my schedule and let you know by Thursday. I hit send and smiled, boundaries in one sentence. The next afternoon at the bank, Ruth stopped by my office again. Guess who just opened an account downstairs? I looked up from my reports. If you say Ethan, she grinned. Yep. Came in with a job offer letter from a local contractor. Said he's rebuilding his credit literally and figuratively. I sat back in my chair. Did he look okay? Like a man who's learned something the hard way, she said. He asked if I could tell you thank you for helping him grow up. I told him you'd probably appreciate hearing it in person. I didn't answer. A part of me still wasn't sure if forgiveness was the same as reopening a door, but later that night as I drove home under the orange wash of sunset, I realized forgiveness didn't have to mean entry, it could simply mean release. That weekend, I finally said yes to dinner. When I walked into my parents' home, the air felt different. The pictures on the wall were the same, the furniture the same, but something in their faces had softened. Dad stood up when I entered, a rare gesture. Mom moved toward me hesitantly, holding a casserole dish like it was armor. Hi, honey, she said. We made your favorite lemon chicken. I smiled faintly. Thanks, Mom. Dinner was cautious at first, conversation meandering through safe topics, weather work, neighborhood gossip. But halfway through dessert, Mom finally exhaled. Ethan told us he saw you at the bank. I nodded. He said you were kind. I didn't correct her. Kind wasn't the word I'd use, but I let her have it. Dad cleared his throat. He's taking responsibility now, paid back some of the debt already. Said you inspired him to fix things. I set my fork down. That's good. Mom's eyes shimmered. Lauren, I know we can't undo what happened, but I hope we can start over. I looked at her, the woman who had raised me to make myself small so others could shine, and for the first time I saw not malice but weariness, maybe even regret. We can, I said softly, as long as starting over doesn't mean going back. She nodded, tears gathering. It won't. After dinner, Dad walked me to my car. The cicadas were louder now, the air thick and humid. You remind me of your grandfather, he said quietly. He had that same way of standing his ground without raising his voice. I smiled. I used to think that made me difficult. He shook his head. No, it makes you right. When I drove away, I didn't feel the usual heaviness of leaving. The guilt was gone, replaced by something cleaner, balance. That night, back at the cabin, I opened my laptop and began drafting a blog post for a community site Nora had encouraged me to join, Lessons in Boundaries, what I learned after my brother charged $48,000 to my card. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation, turning the chaos into clarity, giving shape to what I'd survived. As I hit save, a soft breeze lifted the curtains, carrying the scent of lake water and wild jasmine through the room. This, I thought, is what freedom actually smells like, not the absence of people, but the absence of fear. The night deepened around me, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe I'd finally built a life that no one else could charge to my name.